With me again today, Dave Williams, talk radio host for many years in different markets such as Los Angeles, Dallas, and Sacramento. Thanks for joining me, Dave.
It's a pleasure, Alex. You know, you and I go back a long way
Yep.
to our top 40 days with KROY and music radio in general. So
The thing is, you were at KROY in its heyday as a top 40 radio station. I was there at the tail end before they cut it off and turned it into the Eagle.
Well, the Eagle's a pretty darn good station too.
I would have wanted to work at the Eagle because I actually like that format better.
Yeah, I hear you.
So, I mean, you did top 40 radio in the 70s through the mid 70s. Then you got into talk radio. Talk about that transition.
I can't remember the transition. Honestly, I can't. I went from KROY to Los Angeles and then WHBQ in Memphis, where I was doing a top 40 show at midday. And I was also the program director. I left there and came back to Sacramento to be home. And I wound up doing production at KCTC and KGNR, KCRA radio at the time, actually.
I remember 1320, right?
Yeah. And one thing led to another. And the transition from me doing production, making commercials and so forth, into doing news reporting and then a news talk show with Jerry Grisham, and then doing the morning show at KCRA. It was kind of a blur. It happened very quickly. So I don't know about the transition, but that's what happened. So it started out at KGNR.
So it didn't matter what format, you just liked doing radio.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
So you actually had done mornings before you did talk radio, and in a way, mornings are like talk radio, huh?
Well, they are now. When I was doing it at KROY, we were still just playing the hits, and what personality I could lend to it was done between the records and the commercials. So it was different. And now you get to a point where there are very few songs, and the personalities are personalities. Because what we do is we sit in a little tiny room by ourselves for 4 or 5 hours a day, and we talk into a microphone. There's no sense of interactivity. As you know, the thing that they recommend is like, well, just focus on one person, talk to one person, and just think of that one person. And that's stupid. I'm sorry, even as a raw beginner, I said, well, that's crazy. I'm not just talking to one person. I'm talking to thousands of people, and they can't respond to me. So how am I supposed to do this? That's not the way real conversation works. That's not the way, it's not interactive. It's one way.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to understand that and learn to get along with it and have enough confidence and enough experience in your own work to accept it and just go on from there.
Now, isn't talk radio in some ways structured the same way top 40 radio is, in the sense that you have a topic, say like if you have a call-in show, people call in about a topic, and you're kind of recycling that topic all the time, just like
Sure.
you do with your top hit songs, right?
As a matter of fact, you just hit upon the phrase that's very, very popular. It's the mantra of talk radio programmers, and that is play the hits. Talk about what you think people want to hear. And as a matter of fact, never mind what you think. There are lists of trending topics. You can look at trending topics and find out what people are talking about or what people are interested in finding out about. And those are your top 10 hits for any given day.
Now, compare that with, okay, you did talk radio and sometimes teams, morning teams, like with Bob Nathan at KGNR from 1981 to 1985. And then you guys migrated to KFBK. And that was because why? Because you had great ratings?
Well, that's a funny story. Now that you ask, it has never been told. What happened was, yes, we had great ratings at KGNR. We had a great relationship with management, except that management sat on our contracts and wouldn't release, wouldn't offer for us to sign them. And we were just still learning our way. And we understood that we were number one in the mornings, but so was the show that was our predecessor at KGNR, Larry Page in the morning, with Keith Adams and Bob Van Roy and Joe Miano doing the air fly, all that stuff. They were number one too, so we didn't think we were anything special until we got to a point where they just wouldn't, you know, give us the deal, sign the contract that they had offered. And by the way, we're not talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're talking about, at the time, what was it, 1981? Yeah, we're talking about $25,000 to $30,000 a year, something like that.
That was pretty good money back then, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
minimum wage, I think, was $2 an hour, maybe $3.
I don't know. All I know is it was completely a business deal. And as a matter of fact, the man who was the head of programming at KGNR at the time, Dean Cull, he also hired me for my very first job in radio right out of high school at KCTC. He was the general manager. And he also did me the great favor of firing me from that job.
Happens to everyone in radio.
Just a few months later, exactly. And that was the lesson I learned from Dean. I'm still in touch with Dean now, by the way. 55 years later, he's just the most remarkable man that I've ever met. It's just that, business is business, and, our professional lives have to go where they lead us.
So then you end up at KFBK, which was that already number one, or did you take it to number one?
Well, I don't want to sound like I'm bragging, because it's not.
Well, just for the historic record here.
historically, they were not anywhere near number one at KFBK. Bob Nathan and I came over there with our producer, our editor, Betsy. Excuse me, Betsy Brazil was her name at the time. It's Betsy Burkhart now. And the three of us were hired at the same time. And our audience followed. Our audience found us, I guess I should say, because when you leave a radio station, they don't tell anybody where you're going. So, but they found us. And at KFBK, we became the highest rated radio station, the highest rated show, I should say, in the history of Sacramento radio. And I believe that still stands. We were drawing, for those who understand radio ratings terms, we were hauling down 20 shares.
That's incredible.
Back in the days of diaries. So, yeah, it was great.
That's just, I mean, there were some big morning shows in Sacramento at that time, and to beat them, like, Chris Collins in the Morning Zoo, and then you had Kevin Boom Boom Anderson was somewhere, I think.
Joey Mitchell.
Yeah, Joey Mitchell.
Yeah, there was some great radio there in the time. The thing was, Alex, that what Bob and I did was to not just do a straight morning news show. We gave you the news, but we also gave you what we thought about it. Sometimes we would say something, we would read something and go, well, that's stupid. That doesn't make any sense at all. That's not the way news was done in the early 80s.
Right.
You were supposed to be the great authority and the great know-it-all, and we just had fun with it. And it was that personality aspect that changed it.
for a while you were program director at KFBK, and that meant that you got to basically tell Rush Limbaugh what to do, right?
Yeah, Rush was on from 9 until noon after Bob and I got off in the morning. As a matter of fact, every morning shortly before 9, about 10 minutes till then, he would come in, Rush would come into the studio and sit down, and we would talk on the air with him about what he was going to talk about during his shows. It was a transitional time. It was uh, they have a name for it now in radio. It's called crosstalk. It's fairly. So anyway, you sit down and we would talk about what he had coming up at his show, and we would say things like, "Well, that's Rush Limbaugh coming up at 9 o'clock with having more fun than human beings should be allowed," or things like, "With half of what was the saying? With one with half of his brain tied behind his back just to make sure that it was fair." And those were sayings that he took to the national stage with him when he left in 1988. The three of us became good friends. We hung out a lot. We had a lot of uh, socializing. Went places together and did things together.
So
I
you
don't
would
tell
know more than anyone, was Rush Limbaugh, the character on the air, the same as the guy off the air?
Yes, but it was much bigger on the air. It's like anybody in radio. You are who you are. You're just playing yourself, but it is a role. You are playing. When I go on the radio, I play Dave Williams. I'm doing it now, in fact. But if you were sitting here in my living room having a cup of coffee with me, uh, you might recognize the same person, but um, I'm listening to you instead of talking so much. You know, I'm uh, we're having an interaction. As I say, with Rush or with anybody else, he was the only guy in the room. He had to do all the talking, and Rush had no problem doing that. I don't have Rush's personality. I'm kind of inclined to say his ego, because it takes a tremendous ego to be successful in well, any kind of radio, but especially talk radio. One time, Rush and Bob Nathan and I were rafting on the American River, and we were talking about Rush was very much concerned about his contract negotiations with KFBK. He was very upset because he asked them for a raise to $24,000 a year,
Mhm.
and he was denied. And he had an agreement. The radio station had a contract that said, "Well, if you can get an offer from a top 5 market, top 5, then we can let you out of this contract. But otherwise, no." Rush got a contract offer from WABC in New
ABC.
York.
Okay. The legendary WABC, right?
He left and became the superstar that everybody knows him. But
Yeah.
and Alex, I don't remember our last conversation really. I know we were talking about KROY, but um, I think it's really important that people know whether you agreed with Rush's politics or his way of expressing or anything else. Number one, he was a fabulous radio personality. He was very funny, very creative, more so in Sacramento than he was nationally. And the other thing is that he was really a sweet guy. He was a very good person off the air. And I've never met anybody who didn't agree with that and say, "Well, yeah, I don't agree with him personally. I didn't agree with his politics, but you're right. He was a nice guy." How did we get off on Rush there?
Well, you happened to work with him for, I guess, a few years, or at least 1 year back in, actually, it was 85 through about 88 you worked with
Yeah,
him, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I was program director there for a year.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
yeah, and I was going to say I decided to give that up because I couldn't manage the balance between being the morning personality and being the program director. It was too hard.
All right, Dave. Great talking with you.
Thank you.